to perhaps in some exposed spots 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in the south. Not as powerful as Storm Eunice, but not welcome nevertheless. The rain and the wind pushing through, and another brief spell of rain and sleet at lower levels for Scotland and northern England, snow over the hills. Clear spells then on Saturday evening for a time before more wet weather sweeps in from the Atlantic overnight, and we start off Sunday with some heavy and persistent rain, particularly over northern and western hills. Temperatures recovering through the night, but it's certainly going to be a windy start on Sunday, with those winds coming up from the southwest and spells of rain crossing the country. Again, the wettest weather will be across northern and western hills of England and Wales, the rain then reaching southeast England by the end of the day. A mild day despite the wind and the rain in the south, increasingly blustery with wintry showers returning to Scotland and Northern Ireland, and those winds really pick up strength later Sunday and into Monday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Great job, Patrick. What a fun show. Well, a busy programme tonight in store. In the big question, with a sex offender absconding from an open prison and with a new so-called five-star prison opening in Northamptonshire, should prison be tougher? We'll speak to a man who's been inside and is now a best-selling author, and he'll give his view. My Mark Meets guest is the award-winning journalist and broadcaster James Dellingpole. A man never afraid to go against the grain of public opinion when it comes to climate change, free speech, or COVID. James Dellingpole, let me tell you, is not a boring man. In fact, he's one of the most vibrant and fascinating journalists on Fleet Street, and he's live at 10. We've got more of my alternative news headlines, a satirical take on the day's news at 10:20. Another great British game show, plus my all-star panel tonight. Former Scottish Comedian of the Year, Leo Kirst. Health and fitness guru Marvin Ambrosius, and Daily Mail journalist and broadcaster Emily Hill. The Dream Team. My Big Opinion is next. The case for Brexit gets stronger every day. But first, here are the headlines with me all evening, Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest in the GB newsroom. 4 people have been killed and several others injured as Storm Eunice continues to batter the UK and Ireland. Winds more than 100 miles per hour have uprooted trees and forced hundreds of flights and trains to be cancelled across the country. The O2 Arena in southeast London is among the many buildings to be damaged. Around 1,000 people had to be evacuated as panels were ripped from the roof. Although red weather warnings issued by the Met Office have now expired, thousands are without power and a high-impact amber warning is in force for Wales and many parts of England. At Heathrow Airport, there's been some difficult landings as pilots negotiate these stormy conditions. Planes can be seen bouncing on the runways with gusts of wind, testing the skills of those handling them. Some pilots have even been forced to abandon their descent because of the extreme weather. Russia plans to stage massive drills involving ballistic and cruise missiles tomorrow. President Vladimir Putin will oversee the nuclear exercise, joined by Belarus's Alexander Lukashenko. Warning sirens have sounded in the centre of Donetsk in East Ukraine as shelling increased in the region. The war games come amid heightened tensions with both Moscow and Kiev accusing each other of ceasefire violations. Speaking in Poland earlier, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said there's no evidence to suggest Moscow's moving its forces away from the border.
Ironic that what Mr. Putin did not want to see happen was a stronger NATO on his flank. And that's exactly what he will see going forward.
Kim Potter, a former Minnesota police officer in the US found guilty of manslaughter over the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright, has been jailed for 2 years. During the trial, the 49-year-old said she had meant to draw her taser instead of her handgun during the traffic stop. The fatal shooting of a black motorist by a white officer triggered multiple nights of protests. Great Britain have been stripped of their silver medal in the men's 4x100-metre relay at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. It's after sprinter CJ Uja was found to have committed an anti-doping rule violation by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. A statement issued by the court said Uja did not challenge the decision, but argued he had not knowingly or intentionally doped. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Thanks, Ray. Ray returns in an hour's time. It's Friday, the 18th of February, and you are watching Mark Dolan tonight. A very lively evening of TV entertainment we have for you. Tonight, in The Big Question, with a sex attacker absconding from an open prison, you couldn't make it up. Should we look again at how we treat criminals when we lock them up? Should prison be tougher? We'll hear from all sides on that one, including Jonathan Robinson, a fascinating guy, a man who has spent time inside and has written 2 best-selling books all about it. My Mark Meets Guest is the award-winning journalist and broadcaster James Dellingpole. This guy is fascinating, a man never afraid to go against the grain of public opinion when it comes to climate change, free speech or COVID. He's live at 10 and sparks will fly. Plus another satirical take on the day's big stories in my alternative news headlines. They're happening at 10:20. You won't want to miss it. Public figures and celebrities, look out. Another great British game show is on the way. And reacting to the big stories is my amazing panel tonight. Health and fitness guru Marvin Ambrosius, Daily Mail journalist and broadcaster Emily Hill, and former Scottish Comedian of the Year, and there is competition, Leo Kearse. And of course, I want to hear from you throughout the show. So drop me a line right now, up until 11 o'clock, mark@gbnews.uk. A really busy 3 hours to come. Caroline is in charge tonight, so it's Friday night. Crack open something strong and red, or get the kettle on and tear open the custard creams, and let's get to work. Welcome to Bonkers Britain. 4 schools in Brighton have asked families not to use the expression mum or dad in order that less conventional families don't feel excluded. One of the schools, a primary school no less, has told students literally not to use those words mum or dad when referring to their parents, claiming that the term grown-ups is more appropriate as it does not discriminate. Grow up. In the woke takeover of this country, we've seen great artists and public figures cancelled. We've seen comedians too afraid to tell a joke and musicians too afraid to sing a classic song. We've seen the rewriting of our history, a land grab of our language, and the cancellation of women. And now it's mums and dads that are for the chop. Can you imagine how confusing it is for small children being told that they can't call their mum, mum, someone who gestated them for 9 months, breastfed them and raised them, and dare I say it, a cervix was involved in their arrival on the planet. And they can't call dad, dad, someone who has also contributed to their existence in a pretty fundamental way. I mean, I'll spare you the gory details. It's a family show. We've seen health authorities talk about humans with vaginas, chest feeding rather than breastfeeding, and pregnant people, not pregnant women, which is what they are. This dystopian madness has got to stop. Now, I'm super pro-trans and have many friends who have been on this important and joyous journey. It's a fundamental human right to identify in the way that you so wish. I get it. It's not a life choice, it's who you are. But the line is a clear one. Gender ideology, which challenges the idea that there are two biological sexes, is wrong. Now, don't take my word for it. Professor Robert Winston, one of the most respected experts on fertility in the whole of the world, said just that on BBC's Question Time. Take a look.
Cannot change your sex. Your sex actually is there in every single cell in the body. You have a chromosomal sex, you have genetic sex, you have hormonal sex. I think it's a very sad thing that we can't discuss biological science without actually getting completely caught up emotionally with something which is really completely wrong.
Very sad indeed. If we give in to this stuff, it will only get worse. With this policy, children are being indoctrinated to think that mum is not mum and dad is not dad. How dare a school say what their children can call their parents? This strange dogma, of course, comes from America, and it's rife in our universities, which saw respected Professor Kathleen Stock hounded out of her job for entirely uncontroversial remarks about biological sex. And of course, J.K. Rowling has faced hatred, abuse and attempted cancellation for the same thought crime. Luckily, you can't cancel this billionaire author, a woman whose book sales are only seriously rivaled now by the Bible. Well, this country needs a Bible of common sense. This storm comes on the same day that many on social media reacted with horror watching someone that used to be a man breaking all swimming records in a top university championship in the US. Take a look at this.
Thomas heads in for the final turn. It's going to be a race for second place. It might be Penn going 1-2 with Baroker making the turn currently in second place. And over the last half of the pool, nobody will touch Leah Thomas, who will finish at 4:37.32. Leah Thomas, Ivy League champion.
I'm sorry, but I can't congratulate her. Leah Thomas is the Ivy League champion in the 500 free. Her time of 4 minutes and 32 seconds is a new pool record in this competition. Catherine Buroka, a biological woman, finished in second place. How surprising that someone born with a penis and testicles, overflowing in testosterone from male puberty, and boasting a higher muscle mass should beat a biological woman by 7 seconds. What a surprise. Now, trans people must participate in sport just as they have a huge contribution across all aspects of life, but not at the expense of biological women who are at a clear disadvantage when it comes to sport. Serena Williams, extraordinary athlete though she is, and stronger than most women on the planet, couldn't win a point, let alone a game, against Roger Federer. Ultimately, across both of these stories, what we're seeing is an attack on women, an attack on the nuclear family, an attack on science, an attack on biology, an attack on empathy, and an attack on basic common sense. How can Leah Thomas, in any conscience, celebrate her win against women that have trained for years and who have no chance of success against someone that was born a male? Don't take my word for it. Legendary athlete and trans woman Caitlyn Jenner, an absolute hero of mine, says that this is wrong. And language matters. If you try to erase expressions like mum and dad, there is more than just people's sensitivities at play. you're signing up to this irrational and twisted madness from which there may be no return. Big news on Brexit. Check this out. The Telegraph newspaper are reporting that the European Parliament think that Brits did not know what they were voting for when they chose to leave the bloc. What a bunch of blockheads. This famously undemocratic regime once again shows its contempt for the will of the people. The EU is an unaccountable political monolith, unapologetically detached from the hopes, dreams and aspirations of the people it leads. The EU is interested in only one thing: itself. Why else would they weaponise the Northern Ireland Protocol, which risks restarting the Troubles and causes needless economic pain for all sides? And this is a bloc, by the way, that threatened to erect a border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland when they messed up and failed to order enough vaccines early in the pandemic. The EU is dominated by France and Germany. Smaller countries don't get a look in, Greece being the most egregious example, effectively bankrupted for several generations by that horrific bailout deal struck during the global downturn in 2010. That's how they treat the little guys. And their contempt for voters is clear from this latest outburst. You, the British people, are too stupid and too ignorant to have known what you are voting for. Except you're not. Of course, Brexit is not without its challenges and bumps in the road, and I can't think of too many people who anticipated that there would not be a short-term economic and logistical impact from this major change. But it was about sovereignty, about democracy, and the long-term direction of this country. It's pretty clear that the British people wanted power back in their own hands. Control of our borders, our laws, our money, and our trade policy. And all of those things are now in our gift. Yes, there are compromises. The deal was an absolute horror show for our fishermen. European courts are still too entwined in our constitution. And of course, there is that wretched Northern Ireland Protocol, which divides our country so disgracefully. But as with the friction of goods and other economic tensions, all of this will wash away in time once the politics of our departure has become a distant memory. There will come a point, mark my words, when the EU wants to stop bashing Britain and start doing business with us. We buy more from them, and they, therefore, need our business. Capitalism will win. Now, I got in a bit of hot water this week for the following tweet, and it reads as follows. And this is what I actually tweeted out earlier in the week. I voted Remain, but I'm absolutely loving Brexit because it seems to be annoying all the right people. Now, of course, I'm not happy to see the inevitable impacts that Brexit is having on certain groups and industries, and they must be resolved. But I stand by my comments. So many of my fellow Remainers have proved to be anti-democratic bullies. They are the same people echoing this idea that the public are stupid and didn't know what they were voting for. And these Remainer bullies are also normally the ones with a blue heart next to their profile on Twitter, a mask, of course, the EU flag and pronouns. The Euro zealots seem to be aligned with the Be Kind Brigade, who are anything but. Whether anyone likes it or not, Brexit will be a success because sovereignty and self-determination are always the basis of a successful country. Striking trade deals with scores of countries around the world is our new reality. A deal with America will happen, and there's even talk of a deal with China too. It's obvious that a single country is far more nimble-footed in any trade negotiation compared to a bloc speaking on behalf of 27 member states. Brexit is so many things. It's an insurance policy against a single European army. That project is on the way. And given the dithering and confusion over Ukraine, it's pretty clear that the EU couldn't run a whelk stall, let alone a military operation. The Germans, for example, are far too reliant on Russian gas to stand up to Putin. So I won't take any lectures from them, thank you very much. The EU have equivocated over Ukraine, and we will pay the price. Some of the detail in relation to Brexit doesn't make for great reading, I'll give you that. But the bigger picture is a bright one. Brexit is an insurance policy against ever being a member of the euro. which would stop us acting in the best interests of our own economy. It's an insurance policy against ever being in the Schengen area, which sees the unlimited flow of citizens back and forth with its potential stresses on infrastructure and society. And Brexit is an opportunity for Britain to think differently, to be an agile, low-tax, dynamic and diverse society, marking us out as an economic, diplomatic, military and creative player on the world stage. It ain't perfect, but in my view, the case for Brexit gets stronger by the day. Perhaps the British public weren't so stupid after all. Reacting to the big stories of the day is my amazing panel tonight. Health and fitness guru Marvin Ambrosius. I just feel better looking at him, I'll be honest with you.
Thanks,
Mark. It's got my pulse racing. Daily Mail journalist and broadcaster Emily Hill. A welcome return, Emily, to the show. And a good friend of mine, former Scottish Comedian of the Year and a star cast member of Headliners, Leo Kearse. Great to have all three of you with me. If I can start with you, Emily, I don't know whether you voted Remain or Leave in relation to the Brexit referendum, but I've had it with my fellow Remainers.
Oh, I voted Leave, which is people look at me and they think, oh, she's a Remainer. No, it was funny. The Times did a podcast at the time of the election, trying to figure out what was going on with all these fools who were voting Brexit, and they went up somewhere north and they interviewed all these people and they said it, and then they called it ancestor worship, and I was like, wow, that's quite an offensive thing to say. And then I had a little think and I was like, yep, that's exactly why I did it. I got into that ballot box and I knew my Gramps would turn in his grave if he knew that I'd voted Remain. Although the whole of my life he founded his own, but he was born, you know, he was born in rural Norfolk, you know, grew up in eventually a council house when there were council houses. He was born before that point. He served in World War II. He started his own little business in a van, and then, you know, eventually had a shop that became the family business. And he hated the EU. He hated it. And so, yeah, I think he'd agree with you, Mark. I think he'd say it's going very well.
Marvin, whether you love Brexit or hate it, you can't go around saying that the public didn't know what they were voting for. I think that's a dangerous game to play.
Most certainly. But again, it all came down to massive sales pitches to me. I remember at the time, just from the left and from the right, and being told what was going to happen if we left and what was going to happen if we remained. And it just seemed like all the wrong reasons to leave rather than just to stay to remain. And that's why I voted to remain. And looking at it now and the way it's going exactly how I kind of thought it was going to play out. And it was just getting longer, and the things that were promised were just taking longer. The process of things that were promised, again, taking longer. But again, everybody was giving a sales pitch, something that was too good to be true. And at the same time, what do people do? We listen to our leaders. And at some point, we always believe the leaders, they're not going to lie to us. They're not going to say this isn't going to happen. But as Little Kim and Mud Deep did a song called Money, Power, Respect. But I think the respect was left out on this one.
An interesting point. Leo, am I right in thinking you voted Remain as well? And if so, like me, have you got a touch of buyer's remorse?
Well, yeah. Well, not buyer's remorse, because I didn't get what I bought. But yeah, I voted Remain purely out of self-interest. I'm a comedian, I perform in Europe. It's nice being able to just go there and not worry about visas and all the rest of it. And also I like the steady flow of attractive European women coming to Britain. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think, you know, everybody had all this doom and gloom foretold for Brexit. And I mean, Britain's done really well. Like, the IMF says, like, for the second year running, we've got the strongest, fastest growing G7 economy. We saw with the vaccine rollout, we're a lot more nimble and adaptable now. Europe really messed up its vaccine rollout, and Britain got everybody vaccinated much quicker. Not that I've had a vaccine, funnily enough. But yeah, I mean, it showed that Britain really can do it on her own, and Liz Truss went out and got all the trade deals with countries around the world. So I mean, I think people really talk Britain down, but we're actually a pretty good, capable country. So now I'm not sure if I'd vote Remain again, particularly the way that I've seen Remainers still being bitter about it. I mean, Femi, sorry, whatever he's called, on Twitter, he was still banging on about how terrible it is. It's like it's been 6 years. It's time to get over it and move on.
Yeah, too right. Well, we're going to move on because we've got lots to get through in the next 2 hours. I'm very excited about my Mark Meets guest. It is the one and only James Dellingpole, journalist, broadcaster, and a man not afraid to go against the grain of public opinion. He's with me at 10 o'clock. Also, in our news agenda with the panel, should we have stay-at-home orders when the weather is bad? And we'll bring you the latest on the storms that we've seen battering the country in the last 24 hours. Next, in the big question, should prisons be tougher? We'll speak to an ex-con who thinks they shouldn't. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. So much to get through. See you in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, Margie has emailed in relation to our debate about Brexit, because I'm a Remainer that's had enough of the Remainers in my midst. Let's have a look at this from Margie, who says, Mark, I was disappointed to learn that you voted Remain. Well, Margie, you know what they say. It's a woman's right to change her mind. How about this from Bailey, who says, hi, Mark, I've been loving your show. You speak common sense and giving us a great share of entertainment. Thank you very much, Bailey, on that one. How about this? Many more emails coming in on Brexit. We've definitely sparked a debate. Dear Mark, Brexit is independence. It's not about money. And Evan, I completely agree with you. I think that's a key aspect of it. Matt says, Dear Mark, Brexit is the best thing to happen to this country. Yes, there are challenges that come with it, but the amount of power it gave back to the people makes it all worth it. Brexit is just about as good as sliced bread. Well, Harry, thanks for that. In fact, let's get that started. What is Brexit as good as? Get your suggestions in right now. Mark at gbnews.uk. Thank you so much for your emails. Just a quick one on the other part of my big opinion monologue, because I covered Brexit. I also covered the fact that there are 4 schools in Brighton that are stopping children from calling their parents mum and dad. I mean, we've lost the plot, haven't we? This from Appels, who says, Dear Mark, There has to be a limit on how far this redefinition of old human values can be accepted. This tolerance cannot always tolerate the intolerant. That's a quote from the philosopher Karl Popper, and a very apt quote it is. Finally, Toby on Brexit. Hi, Mark. I'm so glad the mainstream media is finally warming to Brexit. I'm fed up of being marginalised and ridiculed just because I backed Brexit. We wanted freedoms and control, and those Remainers need to let it go and accept the will of the people. We will be on the right side of history. Well, it's a decision and a result that I accepted the day after that referendum vote in 2016. But I guess I'm a bit old-fashioned in that I listen to democratic results. Keep your opinions coming. You know it's the best bit of my show when you get in touch. mark@gbnews.uk. James Dellingpole, live at 10 o'clock, one of the most exciting journalists in the country. But it's time now for the big question. A sex offender branded a menace to females has been recaptured after fleeing from an open prison. Paul Robson, who's 56, was given a life sentence in 2000 after he sexually assaulted a woman at knife point. He walked out of HMP North Sea Camp in Lincolnshire on Sunday and spent 4 days on the run. Robson was arrested in Skegness on Thursday morning after a call from a member of the public who recognised him. Of course, prisons are rarely out of the news, and at the start of February, Britain's first ever eco-friendly super prison, HMP Five Wells in Wellingborough, Northamptonshire, opened. Costing over £250 million to build, the Category C male lockup is the UK's first privately run mega prison, and its rather swanky accommodation has earned it the nickname HMP 5-star, given its similarities to a hotel. So it begs the question, should prison be tougher? Let me know your thoughts, mark@gbnews.uk, or tweet me. We're running a poll at GBNews, and I'll get that result to you shortly. But Jonathan Robinson, who spent a brief stint in jail himself, made a positive experience out of his time inside, with 2 best-selling books detailing what he considers to be an expensive and failing system that fails to tap into the huge potential of many inmates. In It was his first bestseller that won rave reviews, while the follow-up, On It, turns the author's guns towards the failure of most prison establishments to take rehabilitation seriously. I'm delighted to say that Jonathan Robinson joins me now. Hi, Jonathan.
Good evening, Mark. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for joining us. Why doesn't prison work?
Well, this July will see my 11th year anniversary of being put into prison, quite rightly, for all of 17 weeks, which of course makes me an expert in the field. Prison doesn't work because, in my opinion, it doesn't do anything other than warehouse people. Our overcrowded, understaffed, very poorly trained staff basically incarcerate our offenders who, on the whole, are spending their time watching television, smoking funny-looking cigarettes, not really doing anything. Everyone is in agreement that our prison system isn't working. Politicians from both sides of the House for years have acknowledged we have a failing prison system, which costs a fortune, and we have the highest reoffending rates in the EU. What I've been going on and on and on for some time is, if we did more with people whilst we had them in custody, that would automatically reduce reoffending. The few pockets of good work going on, namely the Clean Charity, which is the group of prison restaurants, is a huge success, both with a massive reduction in reoffending, plus also, on the flip side of that, is even newspapers such as the Daily Mail, who are normally so anti-pro-prison work, even they're on side. TripAdvisor named these restaurants, I think there are 11 of them around the country, as the top restaurants in their necks of the woods. Now, this example of inmates who are properly trained 9 till 5 and then on release are given assistance to get work and mentored and looked after properly, just goes to show that if prison is used as purposeful time, it can work and does work. But the problem is, on the whole, prison is just, as I said at the top, just a massive warehouse full of spice. There are more funny-looking cigarettes in prisons than you would have seen at Woodstock. And then the problem from that drops down a level in that not everyone entering a prison is searched. And by that I mean staff, I mean visitors, I mean new inmates. Various government administrations of late have laid out much propaganda about lots of money being spent on new machines to investigate what in people's pockets when they enter prisons. But until everyone is searched, and I mean everyone, drugs will be an ongoing problem. And
Jonathan, briefly, if I may, I understand your point about rehabilitation, and there are doubtless some really talented people incarcerated in our prisons, and they have potential. That's the predominant theme of both of your brilliant books. It's about the potential that's being wasted. But what about the scumbags who make a judgment when they commit a crime, which is, do you know what, prison's not that bad. I've got Sky TV, I've got cigarettes, I've got basically bed and board for a few years. It's not that bad.
Mark, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that everyone is fixable, using a crass term. But I was late 40s when I was quite rightly put into prison. My legs, knees knocking like castanets. I think it was on day one, a young man came up to me and said, "Hello, mate. First time?" And he probably worked that out because I was white as a sheet. And I said yes. And we got chatting a little bit. And I said to him, "Is this your first time?" And he said, "No, mate, this is my 9th time." And I think he must have been mid-20s. And he was intelligent. I don't know what he'd done. But from that moment, Mark, because I'd got the message loud and clear, being led onto the film set that as a prison wing, as a customer, I'd got the message that I'd really mucked up, and that's with an M. But evening one, talking to this young man, someone serving their 9th sentence, the penny dropped there and then that the prison system had allowed this young man to come through its system 9 times wasn't working.
Yeah.
And as I said moments ago, there's no one agrees that prison is working. I mean, I think it's a thing to keep successive governments who are probably quite fearful of prison reform. It's to keep them on side that they're being hard on offenders. And I met very few people who begrudged their sentence.
Yeah.
But I met a lot of people, especially young people, who wanted to do something with their time.
Well, I think the Home Secretary and also the Justice Secretary should read both of your books. Let's bring my panel in, Jonathan, if we can. I'm delighted to say that Emily Hill, Leo Kearse and Marvin Ambrosius are with us. Leo, have you spent any time in the slammer?
No, luckily I haven't. It's quite strange for a Scotsman to be saying that, but no, so far, touch wood.
Well, listen, what are your thoughts about prison? Are you the kind of hang 'em and flog 'em brigade, or do you think we should work on rehabilitation, Leo?
Yeah, well, I used to work in the criminal justice system, so I've got some experience of this. I was a criminal intelligence analyst, and as much as the sort of vengeful Old Testament person in me wants to hang him and flog him, it doesn't really work in terms of a healthy society. You can see countries and regimes that have a really punitive approach to criminality don't have less criminality as a result. So yeah, it doesn't really work. I mean, I think with the specific case of this sex offender who's housed in an open prison, something like that is absolutely ridiculous. He was a violent sexual offender. Why on earth was he in an open prison? You know, open prisons are for women or people who've committed some sort of white collar fraud that isn't violent. isn't interpersonal. You know, this was a terrible decision to put him in an open prison.
Yeah, Emily, what do you think about whether prisons should be tougher or not? We've heard about this HMP 5-star, the first eco prison in the country, £250 million. Is that money well spent?
No. Just because of the eco element, it seems like a catastrophic waste of money, as all their eco schemes, massive white elephants that probably don't even work. They're probably going to freeze in there, which would, I suppose, be a punishment. My dad was a prison visitor, actually, at a prison, and the reality, I have to agree, you know, the reality in there is not pretty at all. Like, it's, you know, they're doing dirty protests, they're doing all sorts of, I mean, it's my worst nightmare. I can't even imagine having done something and then waking up in a prison. You know, it'd be absolutely terrifying. But I completely agree with Leo. I mean, you cannot have convicted sex offenders in open prisons. That's just absolutely unconscionable. And also, what really concerns me is the police and the criminal justice system sort of kind of giving this a free pass. I mean, they seem to be more interested in investigating the Prime Minister for having, you know, birthday cake and a bottle of beer than they are actually prosecuting actual criminals, which is the whole purpose of having a police force.
Marvin, you're a fitness expert. I know you believe in health in relation to mind, body and spirit. And certainly prisons are not healthy places, are they?
No, I do believe in rehabilitation, but you know what? Does the punishment fit the crime? That's always been my biggest perspective on prisons. I don't see how you can have a bunch of people doing particular crimes, and we've seen, and exactly what Leo said, we've got people that have done different crimes on different floors and different sectors. But to me, nobody in prison should be living any better off than anybody that hasn't done a crime out of prison. And that's what we're seeing sometimes. We're seeing these facilities and them having the ability and the amenities to be able to play video games, watch Sky Television, like you mentioned. And there's people that work for a living, working their fingers to the bone, and they can't afford these things, and they're on the outside not doing anything wrong, and then someone's gone to prison, and they're able to have things that a regular person who's trying to pay their taxes, do all the right things, and they can't have them. If you're going to go to prison, you're going to do a crime, the first thing that has to be done, first of all, is once you're in there, you need to have the realization, just like he had, I don't want to be back here. If that realization isn't met, that's where something is failing as well. You should never go into prison and come out and want to reoffend. It should be the immediate rehabilitation factor for that person to go in there and not ever want to go back. So at some point, there's got to be something that's quite strict, something in there, whether it's counselling, some type of feeling to where people can have an understanding that this isn't where you want to be. And I think that, I don't know if the criminal justice system's working in that sense, but I do believe that having posh prisons, I don't think that is the way to go.
Jonathan, briefly, if you can, how do we strike that balance between punishment and rehabilitation?
I think fundamentally the prison system allows its inmates to sit around watching telly and smoking. I don't believe they're allowed to smoke cigarettes anymore, but vaping, in a sense, just to numb them. The prison system is highly unimaginative, run by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suits in petty France, who all seem to loathe each other, and below them are all these different counterparts and organisations who also all seem to loathe each other. The money being spent on education contracts and Lord knows what else, it's one huge mess. And back to what I was saying earlier, when you're actually on the deck amongst prisoners, so many of them quite happy to serve their time, but want to do stuff. And it's like I was talking about Clink restaurants. If you do stuff like this particular very small organisation is doing, it works. An awful lot of prisoners want to make their time purposeful, but it's not the case.
Jonathan, both of your books are absolutely fascinating. The first one is called In It. The second one is On It. It's out now. It's getting rave reviews. It's your diaries from that short period of time that you spent inside. And by goodness, you made the best of it, Jonathan. Do come and see us again on the show soon. It's been a really fascinating conversation. You've been in touch with your views, firstly via Twitter. In our Twitter poll, should prisons be tougher? Well, 91% say yes and 9% say no. I'll get to your feedback very, very shortly. Lots more to come, including in our news agenda. Should there be stay-at-home orders when the weather is bad? Plus, we'll bring you the latest on the storms currently battering the country. Don't forget, at 10 o'clock, my Mark Meets guest is the fascinating journalist. He's written for everyone, The Times, The Mail, The Spectator. He's got a hit podcast. James Dellingpole is someone that's quite happy to go against the grain of public opinion. He's fearless and he's fun as well. He's live at 10. So get your questions in to James Dellingpole. He's got big views on COVID, on Brexit, Boris, climate change, you name it. The email address, as always, mark@gbnews.uk. And I'll get to your feedback after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So many emails coming in relation to Brexit is as good as, because in my big opinion monologue at the start of the show, I've argued that even though I voted Remain, the case for Brexit grows by the day. Well, many of you share that view. So what is Brexit as good as? Well, Brian says Brexit is as good as Colchester United scoring a goal. I should add that Brian lives in Colchester. How about this? Another absolute corker. Brexit is as good as a Westminster elected government not being subservient to a higher authority. Brexit was not about economics. Brexit was about self-governance. David, thank you so much for that. And on prison, let's get a quick word on this. Ben says, Dear Mark, it depends what you see as the purpose of prison. If the purpose is to rehabilitate, then it needs to be lighter and work towards that. If the purpose is to punish and protect the public, then yes, it should be much tougher. Unfortunately, as a society, we sit in the middle and achieve neither. What an articulate email that is. Finally, briefly from Jason. Jason, thanks for your email as well. Dear Mark, I got sentenced to prison for making Mickey Mouse fivers. I went to Winchester Prison, Category B, and was there for 2 weeks before I got transferred to Ford Open Prison for the rest of my sentence. The 2 weeks in Winchester was enough to wake me up and reform me. I haven't been in trouble with the law since. This was 15 years ago, roughly. Bear in mind, when I was in the open prison, I offered to finish the whole sentence there instead of being released early, due to the life I had there was a whole lot better than the one I was being released into. I was refused this and had to leave early. Luckily, I kept my nose clean. Well, Jason, thanks for your really honest email and congratulations on turning your life around. What a legend you are. Now, reacting to the big stories of the day is my amazing panel tonight. Health and fitness guru Marvin Ambrosius, Daily Mail journalist and broadcaster Emily Hill, and former Scottish Comedian of the Year, that's right, the award-winning Leo Kearse. Now, Storm Eunice has been wreaking havoc today across the country. You don't need me to tell you that. Millions of people have been advised to stay at home in what could be one of the worst storms in 3 decades. A gust of 122 miles an hour measured at an exposed point on the Isle of Wight set a provisional record for England as 200,000 homes have been left without power and around 1,000 people had to be evacuated from London's O2 Arena due to severe damage to the venue's roof. I thought that was caused by the Rolling Stones, but no, who knew? We've also seen major disruption to the travel industry with hundreds of rail lines blocked and flight cancellations. This pilot, however, fancied his chances against the elements. Take a look at this.
Easy, 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 easy. Go on, son. Oh, okay, tippy toe.
Bravo. Got to say, our male and female pilots are just the best in class, aren't they? What a skill they have. Now, my thoughts to anyone on board who had already developed a fear of flying in that relation, but at least they did land. Now, with such extreme weather conditions, we all need to apply common sense, of course, if we're going to leave the house. But should the government take the decision out of our hands and mandate a national stay-at-home order? Where have we heard that one before? Emily?
No, they shouldn't, no. But also at the same time, we should take the whole thing seriously. And, you know, whoever told that pilot to take his plane and try to land it in those conditions really needs to have a look at themselves and their qualifications for the job. Although they're wonderful, I agree with you. Let's all give them a round of applause. You know, you've got to take decisions into your own hands. It's not for the government to be saying this or that. We were all told today there's this massive storm. It's a very good idea if you stay at home. There's been, you know, awful. I mean, 4 people have died, so we shouldn't forget that. Like, it's terrible for the people who've died. But did I go out of the house today? Yeah, I did go out of the house today because I had things that I needed to do. So it's not for the government to be saying that, but at the same time, it's good to be informed and to assess the risk because you don't want to do something really foolhardy like try and land a plane in a blizzard.
But it's funny, isn't it, how now, since the pandemic, we default into being controlled. There was a caller to the London radio station LBC earlier today who has said it should be mandated. People should be forced to stay at home. The government must act.
Yeah, it's terrifying. But you see how that gets us into Canada. Sorry, I'm just going to go, you know, it's terrifying.
Canada? What's happening there?
Nothing that's on the news, Mark.
But yeah, I mean, that's the issue, isn't it, is personal responsibility, something we'd forgotten about over the last 2 years.
Yeah, anybody remember personal responsibility? I mean, it's been in decline for a while now. You know, we've got Pride Month. I think we need a shame month as well for people to think about what they do and the impact that it has. People love to blame. I mean, the essence of socialism and wokeism and left-wingism is not taking responsibility for your own choices and your own actions, and instead trying to blame the government or the Tories or you know, systemic lack of privilege or racism or something like that. And you know, people need to understand the person who's got the most impact on your own future is you. And you can, you know, I hate to sound like a motivational speaker for a moment here, but yeah, the government shouldn't be locking people up at home for any reason, whether it's a mild Chinese flu that's going around or a bit of get out there, fly a kite, put some hairs on your chest, even if you're a woman. I like a hairy chest.
Now you're talking. Yes, well, enough of your personal proclivities. Yeah. The issue is that, you know, in the end, life is dangerous.
It is, but at the same time, it is personal responsibility. I agree with everybody here. We have to, at some point, how much do we not believe in ourselves for government not to trust us to make the right informed decisions? By all means, we need the weather warning. We need it. We need to know.
Give us the information.
Yeah, we need to know what's going on. I went outside today. I had to go get my bin from about 10 houses down because it blew down the street. I was quite amazed.
Mine didn't move, by the way, because it was full of empty wine bottles.
Oh, there you go. That's what it is.
Mrs. Dolan, not me, by the way.
Yeah. So that was
she drinks to forget.
That was something that was different. But at the same time, as I knew in myself, I'm like, am I going to go out today? Am I going to drive? Am I going to park under a big tree? Probably not. I'm going to just be responsible and just take a bit of action at home and just do what I need to do. Not let the kids go out on the train, which is probably going to be cancelled anyway.
Yes.
And just do what I think is important for my family.
I know, and I don't want to bring COVID into it, but whoops, there, I have done already.
Yeah.
I think in the course of this pandemic, I mean, OK, we've cut the government some slack in March 2020. We didn't know about this virus. It was the great unknown. We saw those horrific pictures in Italy. You'd have to have a heart of stone and no pulse not to have thought we better do something. But after a few weeks, you know, it was clear that COVID wasn't going anywhere. And I wish, in that case, also, that the public had been informed, right? Here's what we know about the virus. Take care.
Exactly.
You know. So what about the implications of this storm? Because there is one issue, which is it shows that Britain is not very storm ready, is it? Well, we could improve our infrastructure because these storms are going to keep coming.
Well, it's like the snow. Like, we don't have a lot of snow, and every single time the snow comes, what happens? Everything comes to a standstill.
Well, we normally run out of grit, don't we?
We run out of everything.
Metaphorically and literally.
you can't get to work. You complain about what time to get there. You can't get on the trains. You can't do anything. But it happens every time. But again, it's like aircon for the summertime. We don't have aircon on most trains because they say we don't have enough summer.
It's true.
So at some point, when are we going to be able to deal with these problems? You have to spend money. But as we've seen, the government can find money when necessary for their agenda. Mm-hmm. So if we can find the money to do something, we can do it.
What do these storms tell us about our preparedness as a country for rough weather?
I don't, nothing at all. And also the thing is, spending, we're actually talking about massive amounts of government debt. Let's talk. So yeah, I think the thing is like we just love discussing weather, don't we? So you would think that we would be totally prepared for every single eventuality. But I'm sure we'll be talking about this because Michael Fish famously said there wasn't going to be a hurricane, and we're still talking about that.
Weatherman.
So
yeah, that's right.
You know, I'm sure that we'll be talking about this for like 20, 25 years. At the moment in history.
What's amazing is Imperial College's Neil Ferguson predicted a heat wave today. So
wow, there we go.
Yeah.
Well
I arrived
finally got one right.
in shorts, Leo Kurtz.
With a mask on.
With a mask, of course. Got to save a few lives while I'm at it. I mean, look, we don't want to bang on about the Scotland thing, although obviously you are here to tick that box.
What Scotland thing? What is the Scotland thing?
I don't want you to get stuck as, Mr. Scotland. But the bottom line is, and I've lived in Edinburgh for 4 years, the weather can be a bit harsher north of the border.
Yes.
And therefore, the Scots are actually better prepared for this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think the issue that the UK has, people imagine that because we don't have these long, icy winters, that we have good weather. But the most problematic weather is actually weather that's warm, then freezing, then warm, mild, fluctuating over the freezing barrier, because then things get broken. If it just freezes, then everything stays frozen, and you can deal with it. But when everything's thawing and freezing all the time, it's actually very corrosive.
Well, is it down to climate change? We know that every time there's a bit of rain or a bit of snow, that's what many argue. Well, we'll be speaking to the journalist James Dellingpole. Of course, he's a podcast host. He's written for every publication you can think of. He's not afraid to go against the grain of public opinion. And he's live at 10:03. So get your questions in to James Dellingpole right now. Mark at GBNews.uk. A couple of emails before we go, and this is on Brexit, and let's see, I'm going to get the right one because there are so many brilliant emails in relation to Brexit. Dear Mark, of course Brexit has taken longer than planned, says Annie, because of COVID. If the pandemic hadn't happened, we would be flying, but good things come to those who wait. Well, Annie, you're so right about that. On prisons, we've actually got some very strong views from Stephen, who says, prison is about punishment, end of. We need to stop being so woke all the time. These people have committed crimes. And finally, John says, it would be interesting to know how many people have mental health issues in prison. And it's a lack of mental health provisions that possibly suggests why the problem exists in the first place. Brilliant email, John. Keep them coming. Lots more to get through. A busy last hour of the show. My alternative news headlines and James Dellingpole. But first, here's the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. As Storm Eunice moves away, winds will gradually relent during the next 12 to 24 hours. Icy patches in the north overnight, but more wet and windy weather on the way for Saturday and more especially for Sunday. Eunice now moving away, and although still some tight isobars, particularly across eastern and southern parts of the country, its worst winds are beginning to ease. There's still some wintry showers to come for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, snow over hills, rain and sleet at lower levels, and with clear spells and a few lighter winds to come overnight. It looks like there'll be a few icy patches first thing Saturday, with 0 to 1 Celsius for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 2 to 4 Celsius in the south. A bright start though, some sunshine for the Midlands, East Anglia, South East, as well as central and North East Scotland. We keep the sunshine until the afternoon, but elsewhere wet and windy weather pushes through. And this, once more, bringing some impactful winds, 50 to perhaps in some exposed spots, 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts in the south. Not as powerful as Storm Eunice, but not welcome nevertheless. The rain and the wind pushing through, and another brief spell of rain and sleet at lower levels for Scotland and Northern England, snow over the hills. Clear spells then on Saturday evening for a time before more wet weather sweeps in from the Atlantic overnight, and we start off Sunday with some heavy and persistent rain, particularly over northern and western hills. Temperatures recovering through the night, but it's certainly going to be a windy start on Sunday, with those winds coming up from the southwest and spells of rain crossing the country. Again, the wettest weather will be across northern and western hills of England and Wales, the rain then reaching southeast England by the end of the day. A mild day despite the wind and the rain in the south, increasingly blustery with wintry showers returning to Scotland and Northern Ireland, and those winds really pick up strength later Sunday and into Monday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Couldn't be more excited about my Mark Meets guest in just 3 minutes' time. One of the most provocative journalists in the country, podcast host, novelist, author, you name it. James Dellingpole does not do boring, and he's live in just a couple of minutes' time. Get your questions in, mark@gbnews.uk, plus a satirical take on the day's big stories in my alternative news headlines, which we've popped in at 10:20. Plus, more news agenda topics with my amazing panel. Don't forget, after 11, laughs and big stories with tomorrow's papers in Headliners. So lots to get through, but first up, here are the real headlines with the real Ray.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 4 people have been killed and several others injured as Storm Eunice continues to batter the UK and Ireland. Winds more than 100 miles per hour have uprooted trees and forced hundreds of flights and trains to be cancelled across the country. The O2 Arena in southeast London is among the many buildings to be damaged. Around 1,000 people had to be evacuated as panels were ripped from the roof. Although red weather warnings issued by the Met Office have now expired, thousands are without power and a high-impact amber warning is in force for Wales and many parts of England. At Heathrow Airport, there's been some difficult landings as pilots negotiate the stormy conditions. Planes can be seen bouncing on the runways with gusts of wind, testing the skills of those handling them. Some pilots have even been forced to abandon their descent because of the extreme weather. Russia plans to stage massive drills involving ballistic and cruise missiles tomorrow. President Vladimir Putin will oversee the nuclear exercise, joined by Belarus's Alexander Lukashenko. Well, warning sirens have sounded in the centre of Donetsk in East Ukraine as shelling increased in the region. The war games come amid heightened tensions, with both Moscow and Kiev accusing each other of ceasefire violations. Police have scuffled with protesters in Ottawa as they began making arrests in a bid to end the so-called Freedom Convoy, which has blockaded Canada's capital for 3 weeks. Hundreds of officers lined up in front of the truckers near Parliament and began to slowly move towards them. Some protesters decided to kneel down with their arms linked, and one man yelled freedom as police led him away. In all, 15 arrests were made and 4 vehicles towed. The protesters have been calling for an end to cross-border COVID-19 vaccine mandates. And a federal judge has rejected efforts by Donald Trump to toss out conspiracy lawsuits filed by politicians and 2 Capitol Police officers, which claim comments made by the then US president at a rally led to a violent mob attacking the US Capitol. US District Court Judge Amit Mehta said Mr. Trump's words on January 6th last year were likely words of incitement not protected by the First Amendment. 5 people died as a result of the violence, including a US Capitol Police officer. Mr. Trump had told his supporters to fight like hell. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
A big reaction to our conversation about whether there should be stay-at-home orders in relation to bad weather, the likes of which, of course, Britain is facing at the moment. Well, it's a big fat no from yourselves. Howard says, hi, Mark, personal responsibility is not just about allowing people to make right decisions. They should be allowed to make wrong decisions too and cope with the consequences. Otherwise, you learn nothing and you stifle those capable of making good decisions. I couldn't agree with you more, Howard, I've got to say. Also on the storms, Arnold says, dear Mark, personal responsibility is good. The government took away my future. Give people the information and let them do it. If it wasn't for the lockdown or pandemic, my life would probably be 10 times better. We need to stop with this government, we need to stop with this government can solve it approach that's ruined so many young people's lives and their start to adult life. Well, Arnold, thank you so much for that. A moving but important email. Thank you for your candour. Lots of comments and suggestions about what Brexit is as good as. In my big opinion monologue, which I'm delighted to say George has now popped onto our Twitter feed in case you missed it, I'm arguing as a Remainer that the case for Brexit gets stronger every day. Let's have a look at this. Phil says, Mark, Brexit is as good as a fish finger butty. Well, almost, he says. You've got me salivating at that one. How about this? Stuart says, dear Mark, Brexit is as good as listening to Toby Young bitch-slapping James Dellingpole on his podcast. Well, that takes me to my Mark Meets guest tonight. And I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation all day. It is time for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of showbiz, politics, sport, business and beyond, as well as those who simply have a big story to tell. James Dellingpole is an award-winning journalist who has written for the Daily Mail, the Express, the Times, the Telegraph and the Spectator. What a tart. He's a former executive editor for the conservative news network Breitbart and has published several novels, as well as multiple works of non-fiction, including Welcome to Obama Land, I've Seen Your Future and It Doesn't Work, and How to Be Right, the essential guide to making lefty liberals history. How's that going? He's also the star of the popular podcast, The Dellingpod. I'm delighted to welcome James Dellingpole to GB News. Hi, James.
Hi, Mark. I'm so excited. And I'm really relieved as well, because you tried to have me on before, and lots of people thought, oh, this is the sinister, controlled opposition news trying to close you down. They didn't really want you on. But actually, it was just that I've got really crap Wi-Fi at my home. And we finally sorted it out this time, I hope.
Yeah, and of course, the bad weather has incarcerated you round at Shea Dellingpole. So it's great to have you with us tonight, James. I've been reading your CV with fascination. Have you always been a bit of a rebel?
I have. It's even though, I mean, I did end up being a prefect at school, but I think it was more that they felt sorry for me than that they thought I was the kind of person who should be bossing anybody around. I was always the naughty boy, trying to push it as far as he could with the teacher. I mean, I wasn't stupid. I wasn't one of the thick kids, but I was definitely cheeky, a cheeky chappy.
Were you a bright kid?
Yes. Yeah, I was. I mean, look, I define bright. I mean, I was bright enough to get into Oxbridge, and, I got pretty good A-levels and stuff. I mean, I look around, I'll be honest with you, Mark, and this is going to sound slightly arrogant. I don't think I'm a genius, but looking around many of my contemporaries and colleagues in the world right now, I think they've set the bar so low for intelligence that actually I come across as the cleverest person in the room.
And what about your politics? Have you always been centre-right?
You know that saying that if you're not a socialist when you're 20, you're heartless, and if you're not a conservative when you're 40, you're brainless. I never went through the socialist stage for some reason. I always considered myself some kind of conservative, like maybe the term didn't exist when I was younger, but like a South Park conservative, kind of a bit edgy. Do you remember P.J. O'Rourke, the late P.J. O'Rourke, wrote a book called Republican Party Reptile? And there was an essay called How to Drive Fast on Drink and Drugs While Getting Your Wing Wang Squeezed or something. And that was the kind of conservative I wanted to be. But recently I've come to the view that actually left and the right are actually false paradigms. They don't really exist. They're just an illusion put there to give us the idea that we have agency over our lives. And I don't think we do. You look at the political system, and what you find is that we end up voting for the Uniparty. I mean, look at the Conservatives, look at Keir Starmer's Labour. Is there any difference? Is there any difference between them and the Green Party? I don't think so. They're all the bloody same.
Yes, and similarly, previously with Republican and Democratic administrations in Washington, there wasn't much difference, was there? Going from the Bush family to the Obamas, the Clintons. However, things changed under Donald Trump, didn't they?
Yeah, I went through this stage where I was a massive Trumpista, but I've actually moved on from there now, where I'm starting to think that actually anyone who becomes US president, even if he seems to be one of our guys, has actually been pre-selected by the people who really run the country, whose names we don't often know.
Now, let me ask you about your various positions on climate change, on COVID, on wider political issues. Are you deliberately attritional, a contrarian, or do you actually think these things?
No, I don't like the word contrarian because it implies that I take positions just to be annoying. I mean, I may be incredibly annoying. I wouldn't dispute that. But no, I take positions because I find them defensible and because I believe in them. Yeah, not to troll people.
Well, James, let's play a game of Dellingpole bingo. And let's talk, first of all, about climate change. We know that Britain is currently being battered by storms. Is that down to global warming?
I think what we're experiencing now is a phenomenon known as weather. And we often experience weather in all sorts of forms. Sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold, sometimes it's too wet, sometimes it's too dry. And everywhere every day, somewhere in the world, some kind of temperature record is broken. And what happens is that the climate alarmist industry, which is enormous, takes this evidence, cherry picks this evidence and goes, look, there's a really, really hot day in so-and-so, and this means that we've got to bomb the economy back to the dark ages because it's all our fault. It's man-made global warming. It's absolute rubbish. I've spent years researching this. Everything you hear on the TV or reading the papers about the environment and the litany of disasters awaiting us if we don't care for the planet enough, it's absolute rubbish. It's junk science. There is a very, very rich industry of rent-seeking scumbags who make their money out of our fear and credulousness. You know, anyone who owns a wind farm, anyone who profits by bat-chomping, bird-slicing eco-crucifixes is a rent-seeking scumbag. It's crony capitalism of the worst kind.
James, this isn't going to work if you don't get off that fence, okay?
Sorry, I'll try harder.
You know, many would argue that forest fires, floods, rising global temperatures, that's not a conspiracy. Those things are happening. And the vast majority of scientists are agreed that the planet is heating up, and it's as a result of our carbon emissions. That many people can't be wrong.
Thing is, Mark, you'd find you could make the same argument about the jab, couldn't you? The COVID jab. You could say most of the world's doctors recommend that you get this clot shot death jab. It's the idea that these things can be decided by weight of numbers is just absurd. It's truth is truth, lies are lies, junk science is junk science. And what you get regurgitated by propaganda organisations like the BBC through propagandists like David Attenborough is absolute junk science rubbish. It's designed to scare you, to mislead you, to ramp up this Ponzi scheme, which is the environmental spending.
Now, James, you've taken us to round 2 of Dellingpole bingo, and that's the COVID-19 vaccine. It's a bit harsh calling it a death jab. It's very clearly effective at preventing hospitalizations, serious illness and death. Now, I think we're both agreed it ought to be personal choice, but it's a miracle for vulnerable citizens.
I've been watching, I mean, I'm not a great football fan, but I have seen quite a bit of disturbing footage of footballers keeling over in the middle of football matches. Healthy young men in the prime of their life. Why are they doing this? It's a bit suspicious to me that we've got the yellow card reports, we've got the VAERS adverse reaction reports in the US, and we know that the yellow card and the VAERS both massively underreport vaccine injuries. I think that the COVID vaccine has been catastrophic, and I don't think it's a good idea to take it. Although I suppose it is a matter of personal choice, except where children are concerned. Children are not capable of making these decisions, and I think that parents who give their children these vaccines are child abusers, pure and simple.
Well, of course, you're entitled to your view. The government will stress that the vaccine is very safe for anybody in the population to whom it's available. But James, it's all about opinions. How about lockdowns and other COVID measures, masks? The government, the authorities will argue that if masks were to save just a handful of lives, then they're worth it. And the same would go for lockdowns.
Yeah, I dispute all of this. I think for the last 2 years, we've caused enormous damage to our economy. We've needlessly killed hundreds of thousands of jobs. We've destroyed businesses. We've taken away people's freedoms. We've turned people into frightened stay-at-homes. A lot of people still can't go out without wearing one of those face nappies. It's terrible. Given that if you actually look at the statistics, you find that the mortality rate in the last 2 years has been no worse than in many years in the last 50 years. And actually, I question whether there really has been a pandemic at all. I think that this is at best or at worst a bad flu year, nothing more than that. So we've been manipulated.
Say that we've not had a pandemic. This is a virus which, yes, non-fatal to the majority of the population, but it has placed health services around the world under, at times, crippling pressure. You can be a lockdown skeptic without denying COVID.
I'm not even sure that I buy into the idea that health services have been under a special pressure. I mean, they're always operating at the very edge of their capacity. I mean, when have you seen a year where the Daily Mail has not reported about how the NHS is going to be seriously pressured this winter? Every year I can remember. So no, I think if anything, the health services haven't been doing their job because they've been obsessed with this thing they call COVID-19 and have not been treating things like cancer patients, all those people who've been... I heard the other day, a friend of mine lost their 25-year-old friend who had agonizing pains in his spine, kept going to the doctors, try and get it taken seriously. They told him, no, go away, take these painkillers. He had cancer and he's dead now. This 25-year-old is dead. Not of COVID, which, gets you if you're old, but this of cancer, which should have been treated and wasn't, because our health services had not been doing their job.
It is a point I've made on more than one occasion. Now, James, you've got a fan club that's bubbling through my email as we speak. You've been given the name Dellas by Graham. Dear Mark, you must have Dellas on more often. He's great. I most probably agree with him on most things. How about this from Stuart, who says, Dear Mark, please give my regards to Lord Gwent. Thank him for being the hammer of the Twa tea drinkers. It's obviously a bit of an in-joke, but you've got a great following for your podcast. Tell me about the podcast, James.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's my livelihood now, and I absolutely love doing it. It's called the Dellingpole, and my sole criterion is that I should have interesting conversations with interesting peoples. I don't do that ghastly adversarial thing that the BBC tries to do, where they're constantly trying to catch the person out and trying to sort of make life difficult for them. I think people talk much more interestingly if it's a conversation rather than a grilling. And I have all sorts. I mean, some normies might call it conspiracy theory, but I think that what world events are showing increasingly is that conspiracy theory is actually conspiracy fact.
The podcast is hugely entertaining. I would urge and entreat my viewers and listeners to download it. It's called the Dellingpole. It's huge fun and often features Toby Young as well. You make quite the pair. You've got a great chemistry that's been picked up on by a couple of the emails. And look, this represents our audience, OK? A diversity of views, James, mostly positive in relation to you. Mark says, how come James does not work for GBNews? A fresh breath of air. The lefty woke mob must cringe when he speaks. It's fantastic. Hi, Mark, says Andrew. Great interview. James is the dynamic type we need to hear more of. Meanwhile, Robert, oh dear, that guy Dellingpole is a total idiot. And here's the point, James. It's all about opinions.
It is.
What do you think about free speech?
Definitely.
What do you, James, before you go, you are a journalist, a published author, a podcaster. Are you worried about extreme political correctness, this sort of woke wave which is washing across the Western world, impacting free speech?
Oh, totally. I'm terrified of the idea that Nick Clegg, of all people, is now the man at Facebook or whatever it's called, sort of metaverse weirdo-ness. That this guy is in charge of deciding what is fit for our attention and what should be hidden from us. It's appalling. I mean, Nick Clegg should not be running anything at all. He should have been kicked into the wilderness forever. So big tech is closing down free speech, and our government, I don't trust our government at all. They are colluding with big tech to close down free speech. It's really frightening.
And finally, briefly, if you can, James, another email from Jonathan. James, how long would you last in a foxhole with Peter Hitchens? Who would leave first?
Oh, I think Peter Hitchens would definitely quit the foxhole first. I would fight to the last round, and that's the kind of person I am.
Eric says, JD is the best. Get Dellingpole on every week. What an excellent idea. I would jump at the chance. James, let's catch up soon. Stay safe in that crazy weather, and we'll catch up with you in the near future.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Bye-bye.
Let me direct you to James's brilliant podcast. It's called The Delling Pod, and it's available to download from all podcast platforms. Well, lots more to get through. In our news agenda, as political discourse gets more and more toxic, will we ever get back to civilised debate? Well, that's something I try to promote here on this show. And next, my alternative news headlines, a satirical take on the day's big stories. But first this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's time now for my alternative news headlines. According to top biographer Tom Bower, the Duchess of Sussex, Yoko Mono herself, Meghan Markle, sees her relationship with this country as a lost cause and has no intention of coming back to the UK. But it's not all good news this week. With growing tensions in the Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has said that live firing of ballistic and cruise missiles around Crimea and the Black Sea are purely acts of self-defence. In other news, Simon Cowell's never had plastic surgery, Neil Ferguson's modelling's brilliant, and Little Mix are the best band since the Beatles. A school in Lancashire has taken meat off the menu and banned any animal products appearing in lunchboxes. The new rule will see children adopt a vegetarian diet during the school day in order to help the planet. Parents are furious about it, but one positive is that behaviour has improved massively. Pupils are now so exhausted and lacking in energy, they can't cause any trouble in the classroom. Princes William and Harry are set to patch up their relationship prior to the Queen's Jubilee celebrations. It's thought they will resolve their issues in the way that any loving brothers would. They're going to listen to each other, they're going to communicate, and if that doesn't work, it'll be an arm wrestle and Chinese burns. President Biden has said he will act tough with Vladimir Putin over the Ukraine crisis. That's once he's had his afternoon nap, received his medication, and watched his favourite episode of The Golden Girls. Prince Andrew has settled out of court with his sex accuser, Virginia Giuffre, to the tune of £12 million. It's feared the Duke will lose more of his honours, including Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, and perhaps most worryingly, his Pizza Express Woking loyalty card. Losing all of these honours means that Andrew will be relegated to doing nothing. So no different from the last 30 years. And finally, Labour's Emily Thornberry says she would never date someone who hasn't had a COVID jab because they're selfish. Well, that ruins the next series of Love Island, doesn't it? And those are your alternative news headlines. I think she's a babe. Now, back with me and throughout the rest of the show is my amazing panel. Fitness expert and broadcaster Marvin Ambrosius, best-selling author and journalist Emily Hill, and comedian Leo Kearse. Now, BBC Scotland's former editor Sarah Smith has said she was relieved to leave the bile, hatred and misogyny of Scottish politics for a less stressful job in the US. Smith, who is now BBC North America editor and the daughter of Labour leader John Smith, said in an interview, "I worry a lot that the criticism, bile and hatred that I attract from some quarters is damaging the reputation of the BBC." She added that the Beeb was facing enormous scrutiny as Nicola Sturgeon ramps up her campaign for a second independence referendum in 2023. And rather than taking her words on board, SNP MSP James Dellingpole accused Smith of inventing the abuse, saying on Twitter, America would be the go-to place to escape all her imaginary woes then. Not very classy. Now, Dellingpole has since apologised for this tweet, but has he proved Smith's point about the toxic nature of politics in Scotland? Or does all of the UK have a problem when it comes to conducting civilised debates? Leo Kearse, you know Nicola Sturgeon well and the SNP. In fact, didn't you run for high office in Scotland?
I did. I ran for election to the Scottish Parliament. Didn't quite get in. But I was really running to raise awareness of the hate crime bill, which is a pernicious bit of authoritarian legislation that's coming into force in Scotland that's going to deny us free speech.
Well, yeah, that particular legislation could mean that if you make an off-colour joke at home, in the privacy of your own living room, you could get arrested.
In the privacy of your own home. Your own home is traditionally in British law been your own domain, and now the state in Scotland wants to inveigle its way to a seat round your dinner table. So yeah, it's terrible. It could also outlaw comedy, could outlaw plays, could even outlaw religious scripture.
Well, on how many occasions would Billy Connolly have been guilty of hate crimes if you were to look at his back catalogue?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So many times. Scotland's famous for iconoclastic comedians such as Billy Connolly, Jerry Sadowitz, Frankie Boyle, and I think that tradition's going to be trashed. We're just going to have comedians who are scared little milquetoasts, afraid that they're going to say something that strays over the line of acceptability.
Tell me about the political culture up in Scotland. Is it toxic?
It's absolutely toxic. What people don't seem to understand is that the Scottish National Party are a nationalist party. Just like the British National Party, play to the worst emotions of voters, the Scottish National Party are absolutely the same. They're extremely anti-English. They're borderline racist. I mean, you saw SNP goons at the border in white suits, telling English cars to go home. It's disgusting what they do up there. And I think for the SNP, for Jamie Dornan to dismiss what this female journalist has said she's been subjected to, this vile abuse, for him to just dismiss it out of hand, just shows how empowered the SNP are and how they absolutely run the show in Scotland.
Of course, to defend the SNP, it's very clear that in electoral terms, they are very popular, and every time there is a general election, the SNP seem to win more seats. Nicola Sturgeon is arguably the most secure politician in the whole of Western Europe in terms of her position. But as I said earlier to James Dellingpole, it is all about opinions. Marvin, do you think we've got a problem in this country with political discourse?
Most definitely. I think first and foremost, we're on these stages now, especially things like Twitter, where we feel like we're going to cancel ourselves before we even say anything anymore, just like we're saying in Scotland. But we're just in this point now where I don't think we're believing anything anybody's saying. And when I look at politicians, and especially when they're going online and going at another politician talking about what they've said, I'm just thinking, can you not just keep this to yourself? Why does this even need to be put out there? If you're thinking about saying that, you kind of just keep it to yourself. But now, everything's for a reaction, everything's for a story, everything is to create awareness around their own agenda. I think we're just in a complete political discourse at the moment to where we've kind of lost track at what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to be one. We're all just trying to be happy. And I feel like I haven't seen any messaging now where obviously everything runs as a business. We have to make sure that everything can run together and have trades and such. But I just feel like all these politicians at the moment are just arguing over popularity.
Well, I think you're right. And if we're arguing among ourselves as well, aren't we, Emily? I mean, I'm old enough to remember when you had Labour voters, Lib Dem voters, SNP voters, and we all just came along. And when there was an election, you just accepted the result. What's changed?
I have absolutely no idea. I'm a swing voter. I think I voted for everybody at some point, trying to find one of them to believe in. They all disappoint me, and then I don't vote for them again. But the popularity of Nicola Sturgeon really baffles me. The unpopularity of the BBC doesn't at all. I think a lot of people absolutely despise the BBC. They just don't say so in public, and obviously there's no reason for abusing this poor woman. But there's definitely, you know, the BBC. There's legitimate criticisms to be had of the BBC in certain senses. But Nicola Sturgeon, I wrote a Mail Plus column about this, actually. I find it absolutely baffling that the Scots are so behind her, which they seem to be. They say this in all the opinion polls. She's made an absolute mess of everything, as far as I can tell. And in terms of COVID, I mean, I think people long for the kind of this COVID authoritarian. You know, Remainers in London just love the idea that she wants to force the whole of Scotland to be in masks forever. But she's forcing kids up there to sit in classrooms with the windows open in the middle of winter, and then she came up with this ridiculous plan to spend $5 million to improve ventilation, and including £300,000 on cutting the bottoms off the doors. And this is just nonsense. It's a colossal waste of money, and I just don't understand what's going on with the Scots. Like, why do they like this woman?
And it is an important question. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.uk. So many emails coming in across so many issues. Brexit has been a big one for so many of you. Really strong views on our departure from the European Union. But however, and this is a really important email. It's from Rita in Gaston. And she's saying that notwithstanding the pandemic, she's worried that we will eventually become a Chinese-controlled state. We're worried grandparents. And Rita and Gaston, I completely agree with you about that issue. I'll get to more of your emails very, very shortly indeed. Lots of praise coming in for James Dellingpole. Hallelujah, says Avril. Hi, Mark. James Dellingpole. He speaks sense and truth. He's right about the vaccine. The proof is out there. There are many guests to whom you can invite onto the show. I've sent many emails which have seemingly fallen on deaf ears. Well, not deaf on my show, Avril. Really great to have your input on that. We'll debate much more to come. We've got another great British game show, this one based around rough weather. It's called Blown Away. But next in our news agenda, has the UK workforce gone soft? And don't forget, after 11, tomorrow's newspaper front pages in headliners with two top comedians. See you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So many emails, I've got to say. This one in response to my alternative news headlines. It's a brand new item on the show. It's my satirical take on the day's big stories. We'll do it at 10:20 every night. This from Don, who says, "Hi, Mark. When you refer to Emily Thornberry as a babe, do you mean after the film?" Ouch. I think I know what you're saying. I couldn't possibly comment. It's time now for our news agenda with my amazing panel. Marvin Ambrosius, Emily Hill, and Leo Kearse. There we are. Now, look, let's get to this story because I'm fascinated by it. Are you someone who's resisting returning to the office? Well, maybe it's because you're a Londoner. According to new data from the ONS, half of the city are either working from home or following a hybrid working structure, compared to just 20% of employees in other parts of the country. Explaining this anomaly, recruiters say that city firms are desperate to attract the top talent, and the working from home perk has become a crucial proposition since the pandemic. And the white-collar workforce could end up spending even more time at home, with companies like Panasonic and Unilever moving to productivity-focused strategies and trialling a 4-day working week. But according to political economy Professor Skidelsky, companies should stop pandering to their Generation Z employees. Writing in today's Mail, he said, "For the UK economy, this spells a looming disaster. It doesn't just defy common sense, it reveals a dismal lack of understanding about basic economics." So should we adopt a 4-day working week, or is it another sign that our society has become soft? Emily?
Well, I have to say I work from home, but I took a massive pay cut to do so. You know, like I worked in offices throughout my 20s. I had an absolutely miserable time. And then I decided to go freelance and, you know, and then you take everything that you take the consequences of that. You know, if you want to be a writer, you have to accept, I don't earn very much money and, you know, I can't afford this and I can't afford that. The problem here seems to be they want all the perks of, you know, the lifestyle that goes with being in an office and expect to earn the same amount of money and just to have these better terms. But also, having said that, we have proved that these people don't need to go into the office as well. So I don't know, I think it's quite a more complex issue than, it was a very interesting piece that Robert Skidelsky wrote, and really, really worth reading. But it's quite a complex issue that he goes into.
Well, the problem is so much of our economy is based around people going to an office, having a trip to Pret at lunchtime or Sainsbury's for the meal deal.
Yeah.
And then maybe going for a beer after work. There's a whole infrastructure around the office that will be lost, and there will be an economic price.
Well, I think it's going to be the end of London, basically, because and that's very, very worrying because as you say, like office relies on coffee on the train, newspaper on the train, lunch. Pub stuff at the end. Also, I actually don't think it's very good for Generation Z at all because they are going to miss out on meeting people and all the valuable contacts that you have, actually learning how to do the job. I mean, especially with journalism, I think one of the problems with journalism is we've got all this mentality where they think that they can just go on Twitter the whole day, which does not involve reporting or, you know, actually doing proper journalism, and they're not going to learn that if they're sitting at home on their own.
Yeah, gumshoe detective work. Yeah, we're sort of
court reporting. You know, the process that you go through in order to earn your spurs.
However, if businesses are saving money by not having to pay for office rents and air conditioning and lighting, surely they can afford to pay workers more to work from home.
Well, the other thing is like it is very beneficial to the businesses, because the thing is, when you've got your office in your home, when do you leave the office? Like, there's this expectation that you can be there the whole time, and much as there was a culture of presenteeism in the office, I think that having some separation is pretty important.
Yeah, what do you think about this, Leo? I know you're not familiar with offices.
I used to have an office job. I hated it. And what you mentioned about presenteeism, it's so true. Britain's got one of the lowest productivity rates in the whole of the G7, and it's because of our presenteeism. We've got this.
What does that mean?
So basically, we've got this tradition of turning up to the office early, being last to leave, wearing a nice shiny suit, but then not really doing much. You just mess around on Facebook. So the good thing about working from home is you don't need to do any of that presenteeism. You're sitting there in your Winnie the Pooh pajamas, and any messing around you do is accounted for. But the work you do is what you're measured on. You're not measured on the time spent in the office looking like you're working, and that's incredibly important. I think we need to free up these offices. At the moment, what London's lacking is homes, is livable spaces. So these offices aren't needed anymore because people can work from home. So we need to convert the offices into flats, and I can buy one.
How does Leo know I've got Winnie the Pooh pyjamas?
I have no idea.
Who knew? Actually, it's Scooby-Doo. But what do you think about this? I mean, where do you work?
Well, again, most of my business is online. And with going online, I contract for companies online, but some things, like just as what's happened, we were talking about offices space. Now, companies have lost their businesses because of the pandemic. I've recently been told a company I contract for is no longer going to have that building because it's in central London, and they can no longer afford to run it because everyone's working from home. So there are going to be accountability, there's going to be economics involved in this, where companies are going to have to actually just close business in full, because we rely on footfall, we rely on those places going to Pret, we rely on those coffee shops. What happens to these businesses? And we want to build houses, it's great, but that's not affordable homes in London, let's be honest. Who's going to be living in London? Like, are you talking an apartment for 15 million quid?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So.
And also, will there be any point in living in London or any of our major cities if you can work from home?
Exactly. And working from home, it's great. It is a great thing. I love working from home. I think it's fantastic. And again, I am more productive working.
You've got kids.
Yeah.
So it's great from a work-life balance, and you can be there when they get back from school.
I'll give you a great example. I now get to drop my daughter to school and I get to pick her up. I never got to do that with my son, ever. Like, I got to do one of them in the week, maybe a couple, but now I can't live without that. I feel like it's the most important thing in the world for me to be present with my family, because she's not going to be a child forever. And I'm not going to have this time with my wife and my son ever. So I think to myself now, I think for a lot of people as well, it's really put you into that family mode and going, I don't want to lose this lifestyle that I've got, but if I can do my work and I'm proving to do better, why would I have to go back to an office? But again, there's a price to pay for that. And I don't think it's too huge of a price to pay for people not to have work.
I've always been struck, Emily, by how many people watching this show email me to say they love working from home, that actually they've got control of their lives again, it's better for their health, and many say they're more productive as well. Some say that they've never worked so hard in their lives, but it's on their terms. It's important not to demonise people that work from home.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. And also, it's also important to realise that lots of people can't work from home, and those are the people that we also need to remember, because those are the people who are doing real jobs to keep the economy going. You know, truck drivers, obviously we all know about them. They're doing a crucial job. But there's this kind of, what I didn't like about COVID was like this creation of this service class that just kind of keeps us in a state of luxury.
Too right. Well, of course, we will continue that conversation. As we've mentioned, half of Londoners work from home now. And with no daily commute, it turns out people are fleeing cities for a bit of seaside air. A report in the Mail today has found that woke millennials are taking over England's quiet coastal towns and turning them into a hipster's paradise. For example, just 42 miles outside London, Southend-on-Sea is a commuter's dream, and is fast becoming a fashion and foodie hub. And Eastbourne, which has previously been known as God's waiting room, now boasts wacky home designs and trendy cafes thanks to an influx of London creatives. Now, would you guys live in like at the seaside or in the country? Emily?
I was born out in Norfolk, so I grew up in a little place called Blakeney, which I love.
Right. By the sea. Were you on the coast?
Yeah. Right about you could see the sea outside my bedroom.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and actually, GBNews is very popular there. I have
Glad to hear it. They got good taste.
Yeah. I get messages from people at home saying hi. So yeah, and what disturbs me is like people leaving London and basically driving local communities into oblivion because they can't afford to live there anymore. That's what really, really concerns me, and it really worries me because I grew up in a very small rural community, and it was dying even then because Londoners were just buying up holiday homes and nobody could live there anymore. And if that gets worse, and then these people, they don't send their kids to the local schools, they send them to private schools, and these communities are very, very important, and I'm very concerned about that actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's a factor, isn't it? I mean, the issue we've got, and the whole theme of this conversation is about the fact that there's an adjustment happening, Marvin.
Yeah.
The problem is it's happening not over years or decades. It's happening, overnight.
Overnight.
And that's the problem. It will be the adjustment that's such a shock for communities.
But again, this is a domino effect. And what we were just speaking about previously is happening right now. A lot of people that are now working from home with those city jobs, if they're told they don't need to work at home and they're spending, let's say, £2,000 on their mortgage, but they can live in a house twice the size in Eastbourne, a nice, massive house.
No cost of public transport?
No cost, nothing. Better schools, a better system for them, a better, more safer environment for their children. They're going to move there. But again, the domino effect of that is they're going to drive prices up, where those people that are the locals can't buy where they were once living. But then in London, what happens here? The cost of the price of houses is still going up. So then we're left with houses that are being bought from bigger companies just selling rent, and then the rent cost goes up, and then we're all back to square one. It just keeps on going on. We're all going to get driven out of the city. And at some point, something's got to change with these prices of these houses, because we're all just going to end up having to just go somewhere we can have a better standard of living.
Everything comes back to the fact that we don't build enough houses in this country, Leo.
I thought you were going to say everything comes back to the fact that eventually we're all going to have to move to Scotland. That's,
well, you could do worse. It's a beautiful country, although I'm not sure about the current management.
Yeah, and it does have cheap house prices, even now, after all the inflation we've seen. But yeah, I mean, I think part of this is almost like a reverse snobbery. So people don't want London hipsters moving to their supposedly idyllic rural communities. Although having grown up in a rural community, it seemed to be more animal bothering and glue sniffing than idyllic. But like
animal bothering, I think I'll leave that to one side.
But people, it's almost like gentrification. People complain about gentrification. All gentrification means is you can get nice coffee and you don't get mugged. Like if you miss bad coffee and being mugged, again, move to Glasgow. You can experience those things.
So you think gentrification is underrated because what it means is investment and an area just being improved?
Absolutely, yeah. And these people moving from London, I don't think they will all send their kids to private school. I think if they've got the money to send their kids to private school, they're probably going to stay in London. But they're going to move out. They're going to bring, creative industries and bring a surge of sort of optimism and investment and entrepreneurship to the local communities.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Well, I always feel guilty when I visit a seaside town because, I'm London-based and it does feel like an influx, half-term, bank holidays. We turn up and I think annoy the locals, but there's something really worrying about doing that permanently. It's like, certainly pre-pandemic, the good news is that we'd go home on a Sunday night. Now we stay. And that's the problem, isn't it? And some of this is a sort of cultural issue too, about sort of city types not blending in with the locals.
I hated Londoners growing up. They just used to come and they just used to look down on us. And the thing is like you say about gentrification, it's just like the snobbery that goes with it. And the thing is if you've got, lots of money, you are going to spend it in fancy ways.
How did they treat locals? How did you feel treated when you said they looked down on you?
Like a peasant,
Really?
Yeah. And they'd sort of come in with their London ways and their fancy public. And, you'd be a teenager and serving people and they would you'd treat you like a lower class of being. That's
right.
how...
Maybe like you're invisible, like you don't exist?
No, they were quite rude, a lot of them, actually.
Shame on them. Londoners, arrogant and rude. Who knew? Well, it's time now for the Great British Game Show. And this is As you well know, Storm Eunice is wreaking havoc across the UK and it's been inconveniencing everyone. I hope that you've been able to stay safe out there. But storms like this have provided some iconic viral video moments over the years, and their comedic effect has simply blown us away, which is tonight. The reason why we're going to play Blown Away. That's right. Tonight's Great British Game Show is a game of Blown Away, starting with this iconic video of... But hold fire, let me explain the rules. I'm going to ask you at home and my panel to watch a short part of a Stormy video. You've got to tell me what happens next. That's right, what happens next. So this is an iconic video of Irish journalist Theresa Mannion.
People have been spotted in the water here in Blackrock and Salthill.
So what happens next? She seems very stressed out. The weather's bad.
She must get hit by an out-of-control space hopper.
It could be. Do they have space hoppers in Ireland? I think they might. Let's have a look. Let's see what happened next.
People have been spotted in the water here in Blackrock and Salthill both today and yesterday.
That's right, I'm afraid she gets hit by a stop sign, all in the line of duty.
Is she alive?
She is alive, I'm pleased to say.
That didn't look like she was recovering from that, because that was one of those metal stop signs too, so like...
That's pretty brutal.
That was a bit crazy.
I don't know if we're able, Caroline, to run that one again, because that was pretty spectacular stuff. Yes, she's there. And, you know, these reporters are amazing. GB News reporters have been just as brave today. But here she is one more time.
People have been spotted in the water here in Blackrock and Salthill both today and yesterday.
Oh, my God.
There you go. Pretty powerful stuff. I mean, the first time we showed it, that was journalism. The second time... gratuitous, wasn't it? Let's move on to our...
As a result, it does take quite a long time to make change.
It seems like a straightforward interview.
I know this one. He gets a plastic bag in his face.
Does. Any detail on the plastic bag?
My brother's sent it to me already. I think it's Tesco, is it? Or...
Let's have a look.
As a result, it does take quite a long time to make change, even with the best will in the world.
It was a Greggs plastic bag. That was the only redeeming quality of that moment.
It moulded to his face. It was like aliens.
Yeah.
You know when the face hugger clamps onto the face?
No, I think he was able to ingest some of those vegan sausage rolls with it, because it covered his airwaves. Let's have a look at our next viral video. Like a massive pole. What happens to that pole?
Does it fall over?
Let's find out.
Oh my God! Trampoline! Trampoline!
Oh yeah, Paddy.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
I think the funny part of that...
Normally it's a tumbleweed, but on that occasion it was a trampoline which rolled down the street. Doesn't get more random than that, does it?
Very hard to play on it when it's at that angle.
Yeah, just a bit. You'd be pretty acrobatic. How about this one? Here's your next video. What happens next?
Okay, picking it up here in Wilmington, North Carolina, right at the Intracoast store.
You can see that presenter is pushing against the wind.
I've seen this one. Oh. I know what happens. So somebody just strolls past because he's just pretending that it's that windy. Really? He's like really hamming it up for the cameras. So somebody just walks past.
Hams it up. Yeah. Let's have a look and find out.
Okay, picking it up here in Wilmington, North Carolina, right at the Intracoast store, and we're in one of these vans. This is about as nasty as it's been. We had some vans like this last night.
And he scooped the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And how about this one? It's our final viral video. What happens next? Here's the first part.
Dublin pavements.
A lot of these issues happen in Ireland for some reason. So you saw half of that video. The guy's just walking down the street, snowy on the ground. Marvin, any ideas?
I thought he was going to get splashed by a car. I don't know why. That's just something that came.
Yeah, could be a car splash. All right, let's take a look. What happened?
It's still dangerous for Dublin pedestrians.
And down he goes. I'm pleased to say everybody featuring in those videos all recovered from their injuries, but I'm not sure we've recovered from the ensuing laughter. My thanks to my amazing panel tonight. I think you'll agree they've been fantastic. I look forward to all of you returning to the show very, very soon. Also, thanks for your company and, most importantly, your emails as well. So many positive messages. Such an interesting debate that we've had. But the debate will continue because at 11, it's time for Headliners Tomorrow's front pages in the company of two top comedians tonight, Josh Howie and Sajila Kershi. So I'll see you on the other side of the news.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. As Storm Eunice moves away, winds will gradually relent during the next 12 to 24 hours. Icy patches in the north overnight, but more wet and windy weather on the way for Saturday and more especially for Sunday. Eunice now moving away, and although still some tight isobars, particularly across eastern and southern parts of the country, its worst winds are beginning to ease. There's still some wintry showers to come for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, snow over hills, rain and sleet at lower levels, and with clear spells and a few lighter winds to come overnight. It looks like there'll be a few icy patches first thing Saturday, with 0 to 1 Celsius for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, 2 to 4 Celsius in the